All right, this is Shadowdark Campaign Diary number 2. We left off the previous session with the party having reached the larger town of Galena on the map from where they started at Last Watch. This was Last Watch over here. They made their way along this road. I believe the farmer that they helped with the adventure down into the sunken temple was about here. And then they finished their journey along the road here to Galena, where they ended their last session. The next quest that they were heading to, the medicine woman in the woods, who has been missing recently, is somewhere. So if this is where they are here in Galena, I'd put it, somewhere up in this general area. Obviously, the townspeople don't know where this woman was exactly, because they would simply go into the woods, call out her name, and through whatever mysterious means, she would eventually appear to them. So the way I had it figured is that, if the villagers only have to go into this, edge of the woods territory here, since she hasn't been turning up for them, you guys are going to have to go a little deeper. Sort of go in there, wander around, call out for her, try to find out where she is. Maybe just bug her, annoy her until she shows up. So, after their level up and their carousing and their gaining of the other NPC ally, who, not to spoil anything that happens, I don't think you guys can read the post-it note above there, so shouldn't be a spoiler, but it was this girl. I used one of the pre-generated Shadowdark character cards that comes with, I think, I don't remember what it's called. I think it's called the Quick Start set, that has a beginning Game Master's Guide, one copy of a beginning player's guide, and then pre-generated character cards. I think that's everything that comes in that product. Her name was Merwina, for those interested. So they set off into the woods. This was kind of our first real, hex crawl experience with Shadowdark. I've since learned that going off of how things are traditionally done in the OSR, going back to, AD&D first, or basic, BX, all that, that wilderness travel is considered extremely dangerous, and that's almost something for later in the game, for a bit higher levels, whereas, maybe your first 2 or 3 levels are supposed to be the kind of setup where, here's a town, 4 hours away, half a day away is a fairly large dungeon that's level appropriate, so that you can travel back and forth between the town and the dungeon on this sort of relatively safe loop without having to worry about a lot of random encounters and things like that. Because traditionally, random encounters and the things you can encounter in the wilderness can be extremely dangerous, much more dangerous than things you would encounter in level-appropriate starting dungeons and things like that. I didn't know that. That's news to me. I've learned that since then, but I kind of ran it as, earlier levels we'll just get started with the whole random encounter wilderness thing. And I can see from going through some of the random encounters in the Shadowdark book, most of them would just destroy a level 1, level 2 party of 4 characters. Obviously, a lot of the encounters are set up so that combat isn't necessarily the end state, and that there can be opportunities for role-playing or investigation, or simply avoiding the encounter altogether. But you roll on the D100 encounter table, and then you just go with what you roll, my God, you are putting your character's lives into the hands of the gods, and you could just destroy them depending on what you get. So after I had gone through a lot of the encounters in the core book, seeing kind of, what we were dealing with, what was the danger level, I realized I needed to sort of curate which ones they might actually encounter. So I picked out several of the encounters that I liked that I thought were level appropriate off of the D100 forest encounters table, since they were going into a forest. And as they're traveling, I just made random encounter checks like normal. I think she's revised these rules a couple times. So I sort of looked through her different versions, and I compiled the system that I thought worked the best and worked for the kind of game I wanted to run. And I felt good about the system I had come up with when I saw her final version of the hex crawl rules that she released with the PDF for the Western Reacher's Player's Guide. I believe 2 encounter checks every day and 2 encounter checks per night. And on it's just a D6, and on a 1, there's an encounter. So on the first day, they got an encounter. The encounter I used, which was actually not even from the Shadowdark core book. It was from this book, Adventure Anthology for the Shadowdark RPG. So we get everything in there. And I guess if I'm going to, like in the last video, mention things that I didn't like about a product, I will say that product, Adventure Anthology, is phenomenal. Like one of the, outside of the official stuff, which is all great in my opinion, it's like top 2 or 3 products that I've seen for Shadowdark. I think there's like at least 20 adventures in there, and they're not just like one-pagers. They're like, I think each adventure is like 10 to 12 pages long. It gives you like hooks. Each one of them has like an encounter table for getting to and from the actual adventure site. And then the adventures themselves, like the dungeons, the lore, the enemy design, because they usually come with their own like stat blocks too, which if you check them against the similar stat blocks of the same level in the Shadowdark core, appear to be very well balanced. These people clearly were thinking about what they were doing and were going off of the balance that the Shadowdark rules assume and that Kelsey has deemed appropriate for the game. So, highly recommend. It's like one of 2 books, and the other one I think I'll mention later in this video, but it's one of 2 books that I would consider basically indispensable for my campaign, or a sandbox style, where you need a lot of like short adventures to drop in to different places that are relatively easy to digest as a game master and run at the table. The encounter from that book that they rolled up first was a bear that had been wounded by an arrow. There's an arrow sticking out of this bear. It's low energy, close to death. I think in the encounter it was like in a cave. For where we were, I just had it in the middle of the path. They're going down the path. The character that was out front, sort of scouting, is the first one to notice it. Sort of low grumbling. You see a mound of a dark, furry creature blocking the path ahead of you. So they ended up, slowly approaching it once they sort of deduced that it was probably like a wounded animal. The aforementioned fighter character, who is more of a ranger than a fighter. I mean, she literally has the ranger background. So it's an elf ranged fighter who has the background ranger. So basically a ranger. They leaned on her quite a bit, which I'm fine with, like that's what the NPCs are there for. You only have 2 players, so obviously between 2 players you're not going to have skills that are relevant and applicable to every situation you run in. So they all sort of a team effort, sort of soothing the bear, the rangers talking to the bear, keeping it calm. The bear gives a half-hearted swipe at the first PC to approach it, but misses and then sort of like, collapses in exhaustion, so doesn't have the energy to further try to defend itself. They end up removing this arrow, with the ranger. They treat the bear very well, very kind to the bear. Bear seems appreciative. I believe the cleric cast Cure Wounds on the bear, and I ruled it as like the bear is healed, but it could be maybe days since it was wounded. It's very exhausted, on the brink of death. You guys saved it, you healed it, but the Cure Wounds basically sent it into a like a deep, peaceful slumber. I had them identify that it was a goblin arrow that was in this bear, and then I had them find some flecks of blue paint, like dried, chipped blue paint, that was in the trail seemingly left by goblins coming and going from the area where this bear had been wounded. That will come into play later. That hasn't really come up yet until this very most recent session. But I wasn't planning on having it coming up. It was kind of, if they went in certain directions, it would become relevant. That there's, some goblins with, blue paint on them, apparently. Which, by the way, is an idea I stole out of a Matt Colville video. Don't know where he got it. I assume he got it from somewhere. But he offhandedly mentioned that, finding flecks of blue paint in a trail could indicate, I think he even said it was like the blue paint goblin tribe or something like that nearby. And I said, yeah, sounds cool. I like that idea. We all steal shit. You got to. So they continued on. Then that night, as they're making camp, they spiked another encounter. This one was sort of just like a role play, almost like kind of local lore sort of encounter. It was, this one I did get from the Shadowdark core book, and I think it was tree ants come by, just passing through. Huge sentient trees. Probably not good to mess with, but at the same time, they're not, they're not chaotic. They're not looking to fight. So they come through. The character that's on watch, which is my buddy, he has like quite the long conversation with them. My loot goblin wife's character, who in this campaign, by the way, is literally a loot goblin. She is a goblin thief, so she is a loot goblin, straight up. She gets somewhat disinterested after she sees this conversation isn't going anywhere, and she's like, well, I'm just going back to bed, which is fine. And then my buddy's priest character, I got the sense, I think because all of our experience up to this point was 5e, and the way my wife and I both DM 5e is it's a lot more narrative and story focused. It's less about emergent gameplay, which was the phrase I was looking for last video that I could not remember. And he told me afterwards, too, that he was trying to exhaust all the dialogue options. Like this was an NPC in a video game. And he was kind of trying to decide, okay, we found this bear that just has like an arrow sticking out of the side of it. We heal the bear. Bear seems fine. Okay. And then these tree things come wandering through our camp. They don't really have anything they want from us. They're not trying to fight us. They just sort of talk and go on. What's going on? What's going on here with this Shadowdark game? And I tried to, sort of explain to him, like, look, this isn't just completely random. Like, this isn't just a procedural board game where we're just wandering around a map rolling random things. I do curate the experience to a certain extent. But that is kind of how this game's going to be. Shit's just going to happen. I'm sure that as campaign goes on, like if they're traveling through the woods again at a later time, I'm certainly, like, this bear and these trees are going to turn up again, They're going to circle back around. I think if you have, like, a completely random, seemingly pointless encounter like that, I feel like you're missing an opportunity if you don't bring it back up later and have it circle back around somehow. Because I think the players will like that. He did manage to... He was talking to them so much and asking them so many questions and seemingly trying to get something out of them that I did have them just hand him 3, like, magical acorns, which functioned as, like, nerfed healing potions, essentially. I think they healed, like, 1d4 or something like that. Because I was like, yeah, sure, why not? You're trying, you're role-playing a lot, so here, have a little something. Maybe you won't die. So the next day, they continue on. Now they're in the portion of the woods where I had indicated that, you could probably find this medicine woman, mysterious figure. And so they go around, they're calling out for... They didn't really have another approach. I didn't really give them another approach besides just like, well, that the villagers would just wander around and call out for her and she would eventually show up. So if you just go deeper into the woods from where the villagers usually went and do the same thing, presumably she will show up eventually. And so I had her do that. After, maybe like midday of the second day of the journey, she eventually shows up. She's like, what? What do you want? This was a hilarious roleplay encounter because I gave this woman an extremely, like, oh, I wouldn't have known that you were coming into the woods. Just, it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure that was the gist of it. My wife and I just completely fucking lost it at a couple of points, just giggling like children, my whole face going red. I think they enjoyed her quite a bit while she was around. She explained to them that she had pigs. She owns a lot of pigs that she likes quite a bit, and she's proud of them. They're great pigs. And these pigs would go around hunting truffles for her. And these truffles were an integral ingredient in the poultices and healing potions that she was making to trade with the townsfolk. And recently, some goblins had showed up in the area and started taking her pigs. And because she is she's a creature of the forest. She's a druid. She's a druid. Stat block straight out of the core book. And because she can get around, she's in touch with the wood, she can travel safely, things like that. She was able to spy on these goblins, investigate what the hell they were doing, discovered that they are sacrificing her pigs, along with any other random woodland critters or beings that they can get a hold of. They're holed up in like a cave system. They've got a little altar out front. They're conducting ritualistic sacrifices on this altar, which is how she knows they're doing it. She leads them to where, close to where it is, basically within sight, but within safe distance. She agrees to stay behind with the party's donkey and horse that the party acquired while they were in town. This is an interesting question, little sidebar. So they went through the gauntlet before the campaign started in the Curse Scroll 3, Isles of Andric, Midnight Sun Gauntlet. They got quite a bit of treasure from that gauntlet. They lost a lot of characters too, but they got a lot. They found like the secret cache that's hidden behind like the back of the cave wall that you need, like the wand that they found from another area that was also secret. So I felt like they earned it, you know. They found the secret wand that they needed to open up the secret place to get the loot or the cache of treasure. So they got it. And then I didn't feel like it would be fun or fair to wipe their money before they started as actual level 1 characters. So, yeah, you know, they had that money. They spent a lot of it on carousing, but they still had a lot left. So they bought a donkey and a horse at the town Galena they went to. I'm curious how other people handle the gauntlet to level 1 transition. If they find a lot of treasure in the gauntlet, like, what do you do? Like, do they get to spend it all? Like, have a lot of cool stuff when they start as level 1s? Or, you know, or do they just start out with tons of money? You know, I could see problems being created by that. But again, because we were coming from 5e and this was our first Shadowdark experience, I wanted it to be... I wanted them to have like a pretty easy time getting into it, sort of dip their toes in the water, not just get, you know, destroyed, annihilated immediately. So I could see the donkey and the horse being problematic in a sense of like a huge part of this game is the encumbrance system. And the donkey and the horse, in some ways, like, negate that. But so far, they never, you know, they can't take these things into the dungeons with them. And a lot of times, they don't even feel safe bringing the horse and the donkey, like, outside the dungeon. So they'll just leave them in whatever safe place and then go off with them. And then the donkey and horse will just kind of be like torch and ration carriers when they're journeying from one place to another. So, you know, so far, it hasn't broken the game or anything. But again, I'm curious how other people would handle these situations. So the dungeon with the goblins sacrificing things was pulled out of this book here. This was the second book that I referenced earlier, the Devoured Labyrinth. Who's this by? Just to give credit where it's due. I mean, I know it's like an anthology thing. A lot of different people contributed to it, but I'm just wondering what it was published under. Oh, RPG Ramblings, Sword Compass Creations. I think RPG Ramblings is also the people who did the Dark Devilry or Dark Visions book from last week that I had like mixed feelings about. But this book, along with the Adventure Anthology that I showed earlier, basically, I heavily rely on them to run this campaign, because this entire book is just a bunch of 1- and 2-page dungeons that are perfect for populating a hex map with. And you can indicate that, hey, okay, at this location on the map, is this adventure? You can give it a quick perusal, you know, once you've decided that that's the one you want to run because you like the concept or whatever. You can give it a reread or a read or two, just very quickly. Like, this is what they look like. This is the actual dungeon that we ran, so you can see. I think it's literally 5 rooms. Perfect little 5-room dungeon. Same like format and layout as the Shadowdark like official adventures. So just super easy and convenient for sandbox style games. Like, can't recommend those 2 products, Devoured Labyrinth and the Adventure Anthology, enough. Like, they're awesome. And so there's a few goblins that they can see outside the cave. They don't know if there's more in there. Obviously, there are more in there. I think it was three goblins that were outside. Now, goblins, NPC goblins or monster goblins, just like PC goblins in Shadowdark, cannot be surprised. So I did allow my players to, particularly the thief, use stealth to get in position to get closer to the goblins through the underbrush and like the boulders and stuff that were outside the cave. But when they initiated combat, there was no surprise because goblins can't be surprised. But I think very quickly they killed two of the goblins, and then the third goblin failed the morale check and ran back into the cave. I think they had been in the process of getting ready to sacrifice a live pig when the party came along. So the live pig, freaks out, runs off. They go corral the pig. They don't chase the goblin into the dungeon. They go get the pig. They bring the pig back to the medicine woman with the horses. They, I think they might take a little break. Maybe they healed up or something like that. If it was D&D, you would call it like a short rest. And then they go back into the cave. And because it's been a bit, I had the goblins in the cave be ready for them. They were waiting for them. That is part of how I think this sort of... That's how I run dungeons, like they react to what the players do, and if the players go in and leave and then come back later, things will have changed. The things in there will have reacted appropriately to what the characters did. So they go back in, and as soon as they sort of go through the entrance tunnel and get to the area where it widens out, as soon as they show themselves into the wider area, combat ensues. The goblins were waiting for them, shoot some arrows at them. Combat begins. I think it's only two more goblins. There's a goblin shaman, and then there's like a giant centipede that crawls out of something like mid-combat. It's a pet of the goblins. Goblins are always keeping weird, gross pets. So it was a pretty straight-up fight. It wasn't particularly difficult. The giant centipede showing up, I think like right in the middle of the party, halfway through, threw a little wrinkle in there. I had a good moment that I liked where one of the players was sort of trying to angle around. It's like a circular room, but with like a big rock outcropping in the middle of it so that it's kind of like a ring. And this person was trying to go like around the ring to maybe like see if they can get around the other side. They didn't know what everything looked like because as soon as they had gotten into the room, the fight started. And that was where, on the other side, was where the goblin shaman was that they hadn't seen yet. And when the player came around, I described how on the edge of the torchlight, this, you could see this goblin shaman just at the edge of like the visible shadows. And I literally read the description like verbatim from the Goblin Shaman in the Shadowdark book because like Kelsey's writing is so fucking good. Like it's so evocative. Like she gives you one or two sentences and it's creepy. Like it perfectly evokes the sort of tone that I want for Shadowdark. So, it was like a necklace of teeth rattling and it's like a cackling, sharp-toothed monster. And it hit the first spell it cast on the priest character who came across it. I think he burned like all of his luck tokens to save on the effect because he didn't know what was going to happen, which is fair. And then I think they killed the two goblins, so that created a morale check for the Goblin Shaman. Goblin Shaman failed the morale check, unfortunately. But it got to do a couple things, so I was okay with it. And then it ran out. As it was trying to run out, I think the archer got it in the back. And then they went on to the next room that, after like a short ascent up, it had a boulder rolled over it, which I don't think they questioned why the goblins had this room sealed off. But as they opened it, it revealed this dark room with piles of bodies heaped in front of demonic statues. And that was where they ended that session.